Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I have an update on trans golfer Hailey Davidson. Hailey was set to qualify for the LPGA and was on standby essentially. And now Hailey is progressing further to achieving the goal of competing in this very elite tournament. And we can talk about advantages all day long, which absolutely exist and is absolutely irrefutable. However, the main issue that people need to address is that this is literally taking away a spot from a female golfer. Female golfer is sitting at home today because her spot was taken by a male athlete, somebody who should not be competing in a women's competition. That is the main issue. Every male athlete that is pushed forward into women's competitions, I don't care if it's a strength sport, if it's about speed, if it involves throwing punches or throwing or not, or hitting, whether it's a safety issue or not. The fact is, this person is male, so should not be competing in a women's competition. If it was a co-ed situation, if it was mixed doubles, or something like that, or mixed relay, those are actually pretty cool to watch. I like watching those. If it's not something like that, if it's a women's competition, we shouldn't now be allowing males to compete, and vice versa. Well, the fact is, I don't think men would actually care if a woman was able to compete at their level. I don't think they would actually care, but let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. The reason why women's categories were created was for the inclusion of women. It wasn't for the inclusion of men, able-bodied men who were able to compete at an elite level. That's not why categories were created. Categories were created for the inclusion of women. And now we're distorting that and perverting that to include men who want to compete in women's competitions simply because of identity. It's not on. It really isn't. Now with golf, people could say they have the strictest of requirements. You are essentially required to have full gender reassignment surgery in order to participate in women's golf. So Hailey has had the surgery, obviously been transitioning for quite some time now. So as far as Hailey is concerned, I've earned my spot.
For a lot of people, because you were born a man, you clearly have an advantage. Do you accept that?
Honestly, I 100% agree. You know, the men do have advantages. You know, say you get a trans person on hormones for a year, no surgery, nothing. Good. Of course, for the most part, they're going to have an advantage.
People tend to often point to studies, and those studies show that it is an undisputed fact that men are physically stronger than women.
Oh, yeah, agreed.
And therefore, people will look at you and say, surely and clearly, it is obvious to see that you would have the upper hand as you're playing against other women.
And I would agree if that were me, say 5 years ago. I mean, I've started transitioning 8.5 years ago, and as much as I, wish I could have played back then and wanted to play, 2 years after transitioning, it's clearly unfair. I think my whole philosophy behind all this is I don't believe trans people should be banned from sports, but I do believe there need to be guidelines in effect. Because, like I said, I mean, going back even 4 years ago, or even before I had surgery, I definitely had an advantage. I would 100% agree with that. But the difference is, now the years have gone on, I'm 3 years after surgery, and my physical capabilities now, compared to back then, are night and day.
Because I have gone to the extremes of changing my body. That's not how it works. Hailey will always be male. It's as simple as that. That is a fact. So Hailey has reached the second stage of qualifying for the LPGA Tour card. And you know what? Women are now responding to this. Female athletes are responding to this and saying, enough is enough. So 275 female golfers have come forward and opposed this. They sent a letter to the LPGA, the United States Golf Association, and the International Golf Federation, opposing allowing male athletes to compete in women's golf. They signed this letter and it was sent to these organizations 3 days before Davidson competed in the pre-qualifying stage. So despite this, despite 275 female golfers coming forward, signing this letter and opposing the inclusion of male golfers. No policies have been changed, and Davidson is allowed to progress further to qualify for the LPGA. And the L in LPGA stands for ladies.
Listen to this. A shocking report from the United Nations states over 600 female athletes have lost close to 900 medals to transgender opponents. And this comes as over 275 female golfers sent a letter to the LPGA expressing concerns over trans players competing in this week's Q Series qualifiers. Riley Gaines is a host of the Games for Girls podcast on Outkick.com, and she joins me now. Riley, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so let's first talk about the United Nations, which usually operates as a liberal global body, but they actually took up this issue and found that biological men competing in women's sports is a human rights issue. And the woman who delivered this speech and conducted this study said that any country who allows biological men to compete in women's sports is allowing violence against women. So what do you think about this?
Well, I think this is huge, as you said, especially coming from the UN, especially off of the coattails of the Olympic Games, where we saw two athletes who had previously been banned from world championships for failing sex eligibility requirements of having two X chromosomes in a boxing ring, winning gold medals in fights against women. So this is huge. What we know, what has been reported thus far, there are 717 female athletes, a total of 1,055 medals that have been stolen, over 522 competitions across 37 different sports. Again, Carly, that is just the number that has been reported and accounted for. But honestly, can I tell you something? This number, this alarming, shockingly high number really doesn't mean much to me in terms of how inclined I feel to fight this fight and to push back. Again, it's shocking for sure, especially to your average person who may not be as tuned in as people like you and I are. But one girl losing out on opportunities, one girl being exploited in locker rooms, one girl being injured in their sport is one girl too many.
It's so
What's
true.
the magic number?
And unfortunately, it's much more than one. So let's talk about the LPGA and what's going on with them. It wasn't 75 golfers that wrote this letter to the LPGA. It's 275 expressing concern on this very topic.
That's right. And before we get into that, let's reiterate what the LPGA stands for. The Ladies Professional Golf Association. It really is remarkable how little regard they have for the L in their name, being ladies. This story is no different than the others. A less than mediocre man in his rightful category, in this case a former Division II male golfer by the name of Hailey Davidson, turns into a record-smashing woman, which Davidson has done by advancing to the next round in Q School and a step closer to qualifying for an LPGA Tour card. But as you said, girls are finally pushing back. A movement is now in motion, whether it's the 5 universities in the Mountain West Conference in the sport of volleyball forfeiting, high schools in New Hampshire, soccer teams forfeiting, or now these 275 women who oppose Davidson's participation in the women's category. They're finally finding their voice. People are finding the courage to say what we all already know.
Absolutely shocking. So there's your answer to the Megan Rapinos of the world, who say, well, it's only one athlete, one or two athletes. It's not that many. No. When we look at the collective damage that has been done because of this insanity, we're seeing at least 600 female athletes who have been denied medals, who have been denied progressing further in their athletic careers. That is unforgivable. 600 plus. I don't care whether that's over a year or over decades. I don't care whether it's 1 or 600. It should not be happening. And just because it may be one here, one there, that doesn't mean that it's not having a direct impact on women's sports historically, now and in the future. And if that's the number where we're at now, can you imagine what it's going to be if this continues for years to come, for decades to come? I really don't think it will come to that, though. I don't think it will come to that. I don't think it's going to go on for much longer. It can't. I did a story about one female golfer who came forward, and she said that many women want to speak out, but they're afraid to do so. And those who did speak out, they usually do so anonymously. But these female golfers, they've put their name to this letter. They have signed this letter. So they are known to the LPGA and all those organizations. Their name is known. They have come out publicly to show their concern over allowing a male golfer to compete in a women's competition. I did a story recently about Nicole Powers. Nicole has come forward and said, I'm going back to competing against men because I do not belong in the women's competition. Because Nicole is aware that once you're male, you'll always be male. Once you're female, you'll always be female, regardless of how you present yourself. So everybody knows the truth, everybody knows the reality, even those who identify as trans. None of them were getting this far when they were competing in the category that aligns with their biological sex. Suddenly, you're competing in the women's category and you're progressing further in elite competitions, something that most of them were unable to do before. So that speaks volumes. Unfortunately, the letter didn't change anything as Davidson went on to shoot an opening round 78 on Tuesday and continues to vie for an LPGA Tour card. So Davidson tied for the 171st place out of the 194-person field. Only the top 35 and those tied for those positions will advance to the final qualifying. Those players that compete in all 4 rounds of the second qualifying stage will get limited status on the Epson Tour, which is a step below the LPGA. The LPGA's current gender policy allows transgender golfers to participate as long as gender-affirming surgery is done after puberty and hormone therapy requirements have been met.
I just want to read you a few comments from high-profile sporting figures who have criticised the thought of you being included in the LPGA.
Yeah.
I know this is from a few years ago, but it's still something that people talk about. Judy Murray tweeting, It's not fair at all. Protect women's sport. Listen to the facts. The scientists and the medics. This is wrong. You look at Twitter, in light of your recent win, there are people saying things like Hailey Davidson is destroying women's sport. What's your message to them and the impact their words and rhetoric is having on your life?
Yeah, the one I always find interesting is people with daughters. Because, from my outlook, when you're a parent, the one thing you should be telling your kids is, go out there, you can conquer the world. You can take on whoever. I've got a half-sister, and when she was growing up, my parents were telling her that. They weren't going, now, you see that man down the road, you'll never be as good as him, but try as good as you can. I always find it interesting when people with daughters are, oh, you're ruining my daughter's life. And it's like, well, why aren't you telling your daughter she can go conquer the world?
And in response to the backlash, Davidson wrote, every year I have played at Q School, the players have gotten longer and longer to where I was being outdriven by 40 yards consistently in the final round yesterday by one player. Honestly, I love seeing it though, especially since there is this massive lie out there that I am outdriving everyone, which is just so very far from the truth and reality. No, the truth and reality is that Davidson is male, and Davidson will always be male, regardless of gender reaffirming surgery or hormones. Clearly, conservative media needs to give these amazing female athletes way more credit, rather than belittle them and their capabilities, all in an attempt to attack transgender athletes, saying that males and females are not the same, and that sports has categories, is not undermining anybody's capabilities. It's pushing for the categories to be maintained, for the integrity of the categories to be maintained, because those categories were created for the inclusion of women and many other groups who aren't male and able-bodied. So this is the angle that Hailey usually takes. Apparently, we should tell our girls that they can achieve whatever they want to achieve. You know what I'm not afraid to tell girls? I'm not afraid to tell them this truth, that they will never be male, that they will never be a man. That's not undermining them. That's just a biological fact. That's just the truth. Yes, we may have some women who can outperform men in certain circumstances. Yes, that does happen. But typically, at the most elite level, that doesn't happen. Serena Williams, the greatest of all time.
Well, actually, it's funny because Andy Murray, he was been joking about myself and him playing a match, and I'm like, Andy, seriously, like, are you kidding me? Because for me, tennis and men's tennis and women's tennis are completely almost two separate sports. So I'm like, if I were to play Andy Murray, I would lose 6-0, 6-0 in 5 to 6 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, because no, it's true. It's true. It's a completely. It's a completely different sport. The men are a lot faster, and they serve harder, they hit harder. It's just a different game, and I love to play women's tennis. And I only want to play girls because I don't want to be embarrassed. I would not do the tour. I wouldn't do Billie Jean any justice. So Andy, stop it.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna let you kill me.
I'm with you when it comes to tennis. I only want to play girls.
Yeah.
And we got that going on.
Nobody's undermining anybody. No amount of gaslighting or manipulation is going to turn a man into a woman. So I'm so glad to hear about the letter that 275 female golfers have stood up for themselves. But at the same time, it's disappointing to see that it didn't stop this. It didn't prevent this. However, it still speaks volumes. And this is the sort of thing that we need to be doing. As Riley said, we have women in volleyball forfeiting matches, refusing to compete against teams that have male athletes. And now we have these female golfers coming forward. If you need to sign a letter, sign a letter. If you need to speak out, speak out. If you need to wear a t-shirt, wear a t-shirt. Whatever you can do to reinforce this message that women's sports need to be kept female. It has more impact than you realize. We're all talking about it. We're all talking about that letter. Hailey knows in no uncertain terms that 275 women oppose you competing in women's golf. Because prior to this, Hailey was talking about receiving a lot of support from female golfers. This is the sort of thing we're told. We're told that so many women are for this. The reality is that that is not the case. It's just that a lot of them haven't spoken up about it. And I wonder why. There's a lot of people out there who don't like to hear the truth. Whatever you need to do, it will be helpful more than you know towards the goal of saving women's sports. So let me know what you think. Are you disappointed to hear that that amount of women opposing this still wasn't enough to prevent this from happening, to prevent a male athlete progressing further in the competition? Or are you focusing on the positive that those amount of women came forward, signed the letter in the first place? That is a step in the right direction. So thanks for watching. Like, comment and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.